track, but yeah, so now we haven't done any gardens yet on this trip. We've been doing all of our wetland stuff, so now we're starting to pivot to work on gardens. So for some of you guys have done gardening and all that kind of stuff and other related things, we got it under control. All the tasks we have for you will be, we got it under, you guys will be able to do it no problemo. The main thing is, just so you guys know before we get going, is one or both the vans might disappear for a little bit because we need to go get plants for stuff for tomorrow. So so after we do our orientation, after then you guys can grab your gloves and stuff, and then we'll have that with us, and we'll be charging. So that's our logistics. As far as these guys, right? We've talked about what happened with the levee failures here. We talked about the depopulation and all that kind of stuff, and how important it is to try to rebuild community, right? You need a lot of things for community. So there's obviously the infrastructure and all that kind of stuff, but there's also all these things that we maybe don't think of as the very first things. Sometimes we think of the first things as being, you know, safety and that kind of stuff, but having healthy food, having you know, supportive communities, all that stuff is really, really important. And that's the thing that David in particular has been working on, trying to help you know, pull that ripcord on that engine, trying to help get that going and re-going. So with that, I'll turn it over to him and let him tell you what's been going on here and what he does.
All right, I'm David. Glad to meet you. Welcome.
Good to meet you.
And glad to have you here. And I came down from Indiana in 2009 to help rebuild as a full-time volunteer to help rebuild houses. And I was here long term and spent most of my weekends here in the lower Ninth Ward, sitting on the porches talking to people, even though the leaders who were living in a group house on the other parish says, "Oh, don't go to lower Ninth Ward, it's bad." Well, you know, I came over here just because I felt called here and drawn here, and never felt in danger. And ultimately, after doing some other back and forth volunteer work, ended up coming back here. I founded Capstone, and all the while still listening to the community, because what I initially thought would be building a house for homeless people, utilizing homeless with skills, teaching those without skills, ended up inadvertently discovering there was a greater need for food security. We're a food desert. 30% of our population is on poverty level in the lower Ninth Ward. 30% doesn't have transportation. And our closest grocery stores are going to be Walmart, that way, about 3 miles, or a couple of bus transfers into the city at higher prices. Or you can go down to one of our many corner stores down here, find your way through all the alcohol and all the drugs hanging out, and buy $7 a gallon milk. Or if you find any fruit, you might pay $1 a piece for a banana. Or maybe you'll find some oranges that have rotten spots on them if you're lucky, that type of thing. I went around and actually made 6 stops one day just trying to find actual butter as opposed to margarine. And so that's kind of the brief story of around here. So we, through the years, have totally taken over and rehabbed a total of about 40 lots here in the lower Ninth Ward, and we've gardened on them for a period of time, and many of them we've turned back over to the owners, or sometimes organizations, sometimes private owners. We've grown, at one point in time I counted like 52 different varieties of produce, and all of our produce we give away to people in need within the community. And the only thing we sell is our raw honey, and that's to help offset some of the expenses for the food we grow and share. We do aquaculture. I've got the largest system in the city back here we're going to be doing some work on today. Since COVID had dried up volunteer resources and my own health issues had limited my availability. We haven't done a whole lot the last couple of years, but this year, as we're getting back into the flow of things, we're doing primarily aquaculture. And altogether, counting the ones that I have, I've worked on one in Haiti that we set up. I've worked on one in the Navajo Mission in New Mexico, and 2 others here in the city. And sad to say, out of all of those, mine's the only one that's been operating continuously now for 8 years, except we did crash when Ida came around because we didn't have any power for 9 days. And my solar backup system failed, and so the fish died because of lack of oxygen, because no water circulation, which in turn pollutes the plant grow beds. So we're now just getting those back up and running good. So we've got some plants planted, but we're going to replace. We started with recycled hot tubs for our first 3 grow beds, and with Ida, it jostled them around enough that the old brittle plumbing in them just finally gave way. So we've got those removed, and we're going to build a few cement structures out of cement block, and we're going to do it the simple way. We're not going to get mortar and trowel. We're just going to use some landscape caulking in between the cat blocks. Let's see. We've got a couple, since we have so many, we've got a couple of the drainage tiles that need the grow media cleared out away from them, and those tiles replaced, and we've got the new tiles cut and ready to go.
Cool.
And what I can do, we can go back and I can show you and tell you about how the aquaculture system works, unless you've already heard it from the...
No, you should tell them.
Okay.
So that sounds great. And then, so just logistics-wise, bathrooms?
If you need a bathroom, we'll have you go in the back door.
Okay.
You make a little jog in the hall, and the bathroom would be first door on your right.
Okay. And then if we are going back and forth, there's some critters in the back, so we just want to make sure that we're always keeping the gates closed if we're transitioning for or back. Cool.
And the other thing that I had forgot to mention, in order to produce more longevity and long-sustaining food, we've planted altogether about 80 fruit and citrus trees here in the Lower Ninth Ward.
Cool.
And even when I've planted those on the lots we've returned, even 4 and 5 years later, the community is still keeping them mowed, and some have even added little raised bed gardens.
Cool. Starting it off, I like it. Providing the spark, that's great.
Yes.
How do the citrus plots fare in this climate?
We actually have a pretty decent citrus, Plaquemines Parish especially is pretty much known all over for their satsumas, except that they got flooded and FDA says, no, you can't use fruit from flooded trees. But the problem that I've had is that because we do get enough cold weather that they're not very happy. But your oranges and satsumas and grapefruits and the other type of things do pretty good.
This used to be like kind of from here down used to be just like solid, like say like 50 years ago or 60 years ago, it used to be solid citrus.
Yeah. And 100 years ago, the Lower Ninth Ward was all dairy farms.
This was sort of like the food producer for the city. This is a local food producer area for the city.
Yes.
What fish species do you use for the aquaculture?
Well, down here we can't do tilapia. They're a non-invasive species, non-native invasive species. We don't get cold enough to kill them out. My understanding is they've been trying to get rid of some in Lake Pontchartrain for about 15 years.
Oh, really?
And they can't. So they wrote in 5 pages of laws that LSU did a study and said if you want to raise tilapia, you can, but to comply, your infrastructure is going to be about $100,000 to support all the regulations before you even get your first fish.
Wow.
So what I looked at initially is to be able to supply produce. And so I focused on fish not as a market product, but as my source of nutrients for the plants. So we did some koi. Down here, as soon as you have any type of hiccup in the system, or catfish, I mean, the catfish are the first to go because they have pretty good oxygen requirements. So I did koi and goldfish, and that's what I've started the system up with. The 2 raceways we're going to build today will be for other fish that I'm going to start into more of the fish for protein sources.
So the other advantage of if you're doing koi and goldfish, you don't need to meet all the food health
Yeah.
safety things, right? Cool. All right. Well, let's go take a look in the back.
All right, we'll go through this way.
So, wait, should we grab ours?
We have plenty of chance to head them up.
And if you see a big Capstone come out,
He's on the other side.
okay.
Yeah, he's on the other side.
Buddy.
Yeah, Zach's paying attention to him. So. Yeah, we planted those last year.
They're on the right here.
So can I go right there? Yeah.
Can I stand over here?
You're okay. Yeah.